find out what really happens when people have an out-of-body experience. Some who've had a very close brush with death claim that they have walked down a tunnel of light or floated above their own body before going back to it.
And that's what a lot of you are telling us this morning, because you've experienced something like it. Are they real experiences, though, or is it all in the mind? We're discussing that in just a moment. First, let's hear Russell Wayne's account of his own out-of-body experience following a serious motorbike accident.
The first thing I remember is actually being in a dark tunnel, and the walls on this tunnel felt like when you go down a cave, it felt all damp and smooth, and there was a big bright light at the bottom underneath an arch, and I actually walked into the light and felt no pain at all. What I actually remember is looking down on myself and my body on the actual table in the ICU ward with my mum and dad, my mum holding my hand and my dad actually holding her, and they both were crying at the same time. Across from me was the nurses' station with about 12 beds going around in the ICU ward. And the next thing I remember is just floating back up to the ceiling and waking up. It was 6 years ago, this December the 21st, so you can just understand how vivid it is now for me to turn around 6 years later. If you give me a pen and paper, I'd be able to draw you exactly what it was like. It's still in the front of my mind. People are fascinated by it, but at the same time it is a very, very lonely place because you feel that nobody does believe what you're saying about it.
So that's Russell Wayne's experience. Dr. Sam Parnia is heading the study into near-death experiences, and Professor Christopher French is editor of The Skeptic magazine. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Well, Sam, Russell had both experiences, the tunnel of light and floating above
right, yes.
his body. Is that usual for people who've gone through this experience?
It's not uncommon. People who have come close to death for whatever reason have been found to have an experience which involves different things. They may describe feeling very peaceful, seeing a bright, warm, welcoming light. They may describe seeing a tunnel. They may describe going to an area that's very beautiful. They may even describe having an instantaneous panoramic review of their lives. And although all of these aspects, to my mind, are fascinating, they're very individual, they're very subjective, and they cannot be tested or validated. However, a proportion of them, like Russell in this case, will also have a sensation of separating from themselves, going almost to the ceiling and being able to watch details of what was happening. And then often when you speak to doctors and nurses who are present, what they describe seems to be true. So the big question is this really happening? Can they really see, or is it some sort of trick of the mind? And that's what we're trying to find out.
Christopher, what do you think? Editor of The Skeptic magazine, but I don't know whether you're sceptical about this or not.
Well, I'm not sceptical in the sense that we know these things definitely happen. People have these strange experiences and they're often life-transforming. If you've had this experience, then people will report, not surprisingly, that they have less fear of death. They often become more spiritualistic, more interested in the environment, more caring about other people, that they are quite life-transforming. But the big question remains, is it, as you've said, something that's just actually happening in the mind? Is it the visions of a dying brain? Or is it, in fact, the case that the mind can become separated from the brain?
Sam, you've got a very specific test for this, haven't you? Is it the Hammersmith Hospital?
Yes, well, we first of all launched at a symposium at the United Nations, the Mind-Body Symposium, a couple of weeks ago, the world's largest ever study into near-death experiences and what happens when we die. And part of that involves studying the brain in people who've died. And a key thing to understand for most people is that although we commonly perceive death as a moment, scientifically there is no moment of death. We define death when the heart stops beating, and as a consequence we stop breathing and the brain shuts down. You know, we shine the light on the eyes. But from then on, there is a process that begins with a lack of blood flow to the brain cells, etc.
So how do you test for the out-of-body, the floating, though? There's a specific test
So
for
we're
the
trying to see when the person's going through death, at that time, can they really see things from above as they claim they do? So we have pre-installed images in different hospitals. Right now we have 25 major medical centers working with us. And they're positioned such that there is an image that's close to the ceiling that you can only see if you're looking from the ceiling down.
We just saw the... we're just having a look at the newspaper
It's a sort of shelf.
You can see there.
But you said actually that there are 25 different images.
No, there are
stationed.
25 major hospitals in the UK
Is
and
that,
the US.
So it's only that one thing, is it?
So that could be an
that they have
example
to
of
see.
it. And you see there's a triangle underneath. So the idea is very simple. The triangle you could see from the bed. If you open your eyes, you'll see a triangle above you, which is facing down. However, on the other side that faces towards the ceiling, there could be a newspaper clip, there could be a picture of You, for example, something that they wouldn't expect to see in hospital. It's more complex.
Still picture me, they wouldn't necessarily want to come back. It has to be
We'll have to wait and see.
interesting.
See what happens.
We've had a number of emails and text messages, and I just want to talk them through with you, Christopher. Warren says in Brighton, says he's had many out-of-body experiences and he doesn't know how to explain it. But it happens when he falls quickly into a deep sleep and he feels himself floating out of his body.
That is a common
And is it
experience
really?
as well. I mean, this is related to something called sleep paralysis, which we're very interested in terms of doing research. And there are interesting parallels between sleep paralysis and the near-death experience. But in terms of trying to explain, well, what is going on, then there are psychological theories that would explain how it may be that you can be totally convinced that you are outside your body, but in fact it's an illusion, it's a hallucination.
How long before you get a result, Sam, do you think?
I think we're probably looking at about 2 to 3 years before we get results. Although, in fairness, Chris and I were talking about this. If we were to get 1 or 2 cases, we're looking at 200 or 300. But if we get 1 or 2, we'd probably publish those as being very significant and then adapt the study into higher technology means by, for example, random image generators and things, which makes it absolutely 100% proof that nobody else could have seen those pictures. That what people are saying is true.
Just a quick text message from somebody saying, if somebody has an out-of-body experience, I don't think they're going to be looking for newspaper cuttings. I mean, the point being that they might not see what you want them to see,
Absolutely,
but
yes.
they might still really believe or even have experienced an out-of-body experience. The whole thing that people have been telling us today is about going down a tunnel and there's a white light at the end. So they might
Absolutely.
not necessarily be above looking down on themselves, I suppose.
I collected, before I even did this study, I collected about 500 cases of people who've had these near-death and out-of-body experiences, and I interviewed them, and I was so touched by what people said, and they're very different. And ultimately, I put it into a book just called What Happens When We Die, because I thought it was so fascinating, and it gives a background to why we should now. But you have to realize we're really going towards the frontiers. Nobody's done this before, so we may find that the images weren't right, they weren't too high, too low, but since no one's done it before, we don't know. People do have a comeback sometimes and say things like they were looking at dust and saying, well, how come this hospital's so dirty up there? Why don't they clean up the clock? So you just don't know what they're going to look at.
It's absolutely fascinating. Good luck with it, Sam.
Yes, and do come back. I know we're looking at
Have
2
to
years
be there,
hence,
so-
but it'd be interesting to see
And
what
Christopher, thank you too.
happens.
Thank
as
you.
well. Thank you both very much. 7:45.
This is Breakfast from BBC News. Here are our main